the Midwest is a safe place. So when something this horrible can happen in such a small town setting, it's almost as if, how can evil exist so deeply in this good community? If evil of this nature can exist in this small rural environment, how much more evil can exist in the bigger world? I think I was watching the news one evening, and they were talking about the release of a child killer, a lady by the name of Gertrude Baniszewski, and a little bit about the case about Sylvia Likens. And not having grown up in Indiana, I really didn't know much about it. It just really, really disturbed me that after 20 years, someone that had done the things that she had done was being released from prison. And so that's the part that really bothered me. And I think I had a couple sleepless nights. And I can recall very vividly, I was at work and talking to some of my coworkers again, and I said, somebody ought to do something. Somebody really needs to just make an objection. And we said, what we need to do? We need to get a petition going. That would be good. That's what citizens can do. They can just make their voice heard. And I thought, I think that my husband needs to go down and make a big sign and stand on the corner and get a petition. So I called him up on the phone because he was working for himself at the time. And I said, you need to go down and do this thing. So he did that. And after talking to him later, he said that he was just standing there with these group of papers in his hand. And he saw all these media cameras and trucks, and wherever they were, he was moving over to the other side because he's not a real camera media type person. He's pretty private. So they were on one side of the monument circle and he was on the other side, and he kind of moved away from them. Well, then he kind of realized they were there for him.
WIBC, Indianapolis.
Parole in a 20-year-old murder case. And this is WIBC News. 20 years ago, Sylvia Likens was the victim of the ultimate child abuse. She was beaten, burned, and starved before dying. Gertrude Baniszewski was convicted of the 1965 murder. Earlier this week, it was reported the state parole board had decided to free the woman. In Greenwood, Thomi Elmore is president of the newly formed Indiana chapter of Society's League Against Molestation, SLAM. She hopes to gather 5,000 signatures in opposition to the board's decision. She says the petition will be presented to the parole board on Monday, and while Elmore is gathering signatures, others are meeting and discussing child abuse.
Day after day, people would come up with stories about. They lived in the neighborhood. They knew of the case. They knew. It got bigger and bigger and more horrible as time went by, because so many people, with tears in their eyes, would come up signing this, saying they went to school with Sylvia. They knew about Sylvia. They were in the military when this happened. And how horrific it was to live in Indianapolis during that time when the case was brought to light about the girl being killed in the basement. And when we brought it back up, it was like a wound. It was like a wound that was opened again, because a lot of these people knew something was going on. And back then, you just didn't say. You didn't get involved. You didn't speak up. Well, when you're first starting something like that, you think, well, I need to get 100 signatures, or whatever that goal is. And then you see the 100, and you see 150, then you see 200 and 300 and 400 and 500. It's just something that internally kicks in, that this thing is bigger than anything that you ever had imagined to happen. Because we had people that came down of official nature, past attorney generals, people that were involved in the case at that time, that came down and signed their name. So it was like, wow, we've really, this is kind of cliche, struck a nerve with people.
Right now, inside the State Office building, Thomi and Glenn Elmore are presenting to the Indiana Parole Board petitions containing in the neighborhood of 5,000 signatures. The signers want the Parole Board to rescind its action, which would free Gertrude Baniszewski, convicted in the torture murder of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens, from the women's prison. Like the majority of the parole board, one man told me he felt the Baniszewski woman had paid for her crime and deserves to be freed. Whether the petitions the Elmores worked so hard to get signatures on will have any effect on the parole board is doubtful. In fact, Chairman Lou Gregory, who is from another area of Indiana and probably is too young to remember the Likens murder, has said the parole can't be revoked unless its terms are violated. He did vote against it. Bill Donnella, WIBC News.
Actually, there was a group of attorneys that came to us and started getting involved with saying, you know, we need to really look into this. Come meet with us. So, okay, that's fine. We went and met with them, and they said, you know, we're looking at the statutes of the law, and we're thinking that maybe they violated some open door statute. And we're like, wow, this is great that we can do something. Maybe in this regard, we can actually, you know, reverse this decision or something. I think when I met Jenny, her response to me was she didn't understand our motivation for getting involved because we didn't know her or Sylvia. But I think that after we kind of spent some time together, I think she understood that our motivations were altruistic, and that really the only thing that we actually didn't want anything, that we were just here to represent a voice for her and her sister.
A parole board decision granting the release of torture slayer Gertrude Baniszewski has been ruled null and void by a Marion County judge. The judge ruled the Indiana Parole Board violated Indiana's open door law by holding their parole hearing in private. The ruling was the result of a suit brought by the victims' rights group Protect the Innocent, Society's League Against Molestation, and Jenny Likens, the younger sister of Sylvia, the girl tortured to death by Mrs. Baniszewski and a gang of neighborhood children. The judge ruled that because the parole board is a public body, they must abide by the state's open door laws, something that the board never has done. The parole hearing on Baniszewski must be held again after the public has been notified and arrangements made for the hearing to be open.
I can remember Jenny Likens being in the courtroom, and she just started crying. And we walked out with her together, and it was just kind of an overwhelming, wow, we did something. Just people like us with really limited resources can actually do something. We can now look forward to the next thing that's going to be done is the actual parole hearing itself.
Under heavy security, convicted murderess Gertrude Baniszewski appeared before the Indiana Parole Board and asked to be released from prison after 20 years behind bars.
I'm just asking for mercy, nothing else.
Baniszewski's request for an early parole from prison outraged victims' rights groups throughout the community, who said she should never have a second chance. But in September, the parole board voted to give her that chance. Then protesters collected 40,000 signatures objecting to her release. Baniszewski told the parole board she's a born-again Christian. She burst into tears when asked to talk about her crime.
I can't do it, and I'm sorry. That's all I can say. And I ask him to forgive me. That's all I can tell you.
It almost was like a scripted play, is how I felt it was. I really didn't have much hope that it was going to be overturned inside. On the outside, you're trying to tell people there's a chance. But because of other things that we thought may happen and other things that were discussed with the attorneys, we felt pretty surely that she probably this decision was going to be the same.
Once again, the board voted 3-2 to let Baniszewski go.
The bottom line, you cannot bring someone who is dead and gone back to life. And I wouldn't be a member of this board if I didn't believe people could change.
Baniszewski will be released soon, as she already has a place to stay, a new job, and a new identity, so she can try to lead a normal life. Edie Magnus, ABC News, Indianapolis.
People in the room were aghast. And I'm going to tell you this because we became aware of other situations within the Department of Corrections that were going on, why this even came to light, why this became a bigger case than we thought. And when the FBI came knocking at our door and asking us questions, it was like, oh, I think something's going on that we don't really know about. We did find out later there had been sexual abuse of prisoners in the prison, of women, and that there were several women prisoners that had subsequently become pregnant. There was a case against some of the guards. Their key witness in that case for the Department of Corrections was Gertrude Baniszewski. So our feeling was they told her that if she testified, she would have this early release. I don't have 100% proof of that, but my thinking is when we became aware that this has been a fact, because you can research that there was a case like that, and she was the witness for the Department of Corrections, it just leads you to believe that she was being good, she was doing the things that she needed to do, and the parole came up and she was to be released. I don't know if Gertrude was repentant or not. That wasn't really where I was coming from. I was just coming from the point that there are all these voices that say 20 years is not enough time for the life of that one child. Because to me, and I think this speaks to most of us in society, a child's life is the most valuable thing. And people need to speak up for that.